Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the topic of feeling suicidal and why it happens to us, and maybe what we can do about resolving that in our life. I am making this video from a city of India, and looking at my background, see already that there are a couple of buildings in front of me which are showing so many different um, humans that reside right in front of me. And apart from these two buildings, which are just in front of the building in which I'm making this video from, there are multitudes of buildings here, at least 10,000 or more humans living within a radius of a few miles from here. And despite so many humans residing in so many buildings around us, we are still alone. And that's the number one reason why people get suicidal, when they feel alone in a sea of humans. But is that the only time we feel suicidal? We can also feel suicidal, and we have, even though there are a sea of humans who are coexisting with us in the next building, in the same building, or even in the same house with us, if we do not have a meaningful connection with them, a deep, depth filled connection with them, then too people feel lost enough to start feeling suicidal. Because it doesn't matter the number of humans you have access to, it doesn't matter the number of people you know superficially, it doesn't matter the number of people who know you superficially, but what actually matters is how deeply are you connected to either humanity, and if not humanity, how deeply are you connected to nature, the world around us, the trees, the plants, because all of us are involved in creating the ecosystem of earth. And when we are deeply disconnected from the reasons for being alive, when we are deeply disconnected as to why we should be alive, or what is the purpose, the hidden purpose, or the main purpose, or the deeper purpose of us being alive, those are all the reasons why we start feeling suicidal. We are disconnected from our reasons for being, just being human, and which causes us to go into deep depression, or deeply suicidal or darkness filled thoughts. So, I'm gonna start a little with my own background to show you how I have overcome depression and suicidal thoughts, and I am not yet completely overcome it, but I feel 90% of the time I am out of the whole era of depression that surrounded my life for around 30 years of my life. So, ever since I was a teenager, I used to feel extremely suicidal, or if not suicidal, I used to feel deeply, deeply depressed, and I wanted to become a mother at that phase. I felt like I need a child to feel deeply connected to some human when I was a teen. And I didn't know why I was feeling like that. Why was I feeling so maternal? Why was I feeling so wanting to have a family of my own? But that feeling never went away from me for at least 25 years of my life, until I'd reached, like, from, let's say, 15 years of age. Not 25, 15 to 35 is how many years? 20 years. So for about 20 years of my life, I kept deeply having this feeling that I want to be a mother, I want to be a mother. And I want to be closely connected to a human being, like how a mother feels that connection. And why was that happening to me? Because though my mother was very loving when we were young, and deeply, we both, me and my brother, both loved our mother a lot more than we loved our father, and we always wanted to be attached to our mother. Um, After we reached our teen years, that depth and bonding that we had with our mother slowly started disappearing. And while it's natural for teens to start separating from their parents, in our case, our mother was separating from us. She was not attached to us. She was actually not attached that much to the worldly life. And at that time, I didn't know why that was happening to my mother, because when you are a teen, you don't understand what's going on with your parents. You don't have the maturity to understand the deeper problems going on in their life. But only after I started living alone in as a 20-year-old in a different city and in a different country, where I didn't have the same deep, meaningful connections that I used to have when I was growing up. I didn't have close friendships. I didn't have close relationships. And my mother died actually when I was in my 20s, early 20s. So before I left for US, I didn't have any main social support system in the family life. And this had started happening actually since I was a child. But as a child, you can be easily entertained by friends. As a child, you can be easily regulated by schools. You can be easily kept entertained by TV. So all these things had me entertained enough, or my hobbies that my parents put me into. So because of that, I had never really felt as lost as I felt when I moved to US. So for 22 years of my life, when I was growing up in India, um, I had a reasonably happy life. And in that reasonably happy life, also, since teen years, I was feeling this, having this feeling of being a mother, but because I wanted to be closer to a human being, which was not happening in my life. I didn't have a close relationship. There were three human beings who coexisted with me in the same house, but I didn't have a deep, meaningful relationship with any of them. My mother, I realized, had her own problems, and because of her problems, she had completely started isolating herself from all humanity in her life. She wanted the love from her brothers and sisters and parents, but they didn't consider her important enough to call her, be with her, visit her, or even give her importance when we would visit them. So all these things were slowly detaching her from her life. And this detachment of hers from her life only eventually led her to her death when she died in her 40s. And so, now coming back to my mother, there was a very interesting thing I learned about my mother when I was, after she had died. One day I was just going through her clothes after she died. I was a very practical kid, so I decided to give away many of her clothes to charity after she died. And while I was giving away her clothes, maybe around that time or maybe a few years later, when I would visit back from US, I think it was around that time because I found it in the house where my dad had moved away from later on. So I found in the room that she used to live, under her bed, a a few pages of notes from a diary. And in that diary, something was written which made me think that, oh, so my mother was suicidal when she was in our teen years. I didn't realize that. But that's what the diary entry seemed to, and it wasn't a diary, it was just a few pages of a diary that were hidden under her bed, which seemed to indicate as if she was very suicidal or unhappy or depressed in her life. And that made me correlate it with the fact that my mother and father used to always fight in the last years of her life of her not taking medicine. And my dad always used to push this narrative that my mother was depressed, and being depressed, they had taken her to a doctor, and the doctor had given her some depression medications, and she was not taking her medications. So my dad used to constantly keep complaining to everyone who my mother knew and everyone who my father knew that his wife doesn't take medicines. And at that time, I had been studying pharmacy, and being a pharmacy student, I also understood the value of why medication should be taken. Um, but there was a but, and all the reasons for this but came to me as I grew as a pharmacist in US, as I learned more about medicine, as I learned more deeply about medicine from the different degree programs and different continuing education programs I had to take as a pharmacist while working as a pharmacist in US. And that's when I slowly realized many things about depression, antidepressant medicines. I studied my patients also there in Utah, where I used to live, where depression was one of the major sector where patients would come to the pharmacy to get their medicines. So I saw a lot of depression filled patients in my life while working there. And there were studies where been done in Utah, which showed that depression was high in that state. So while I was living there, and while I was going through my own depression filled phases while living there, and more than depression for me, it was loneliness filled phases, because I have moved in from a different country. It is a complete cultural difference living in a different country. But other than that, I'm also a very introvert kind of a person, so I don't go out of my way to make friendships. I'm actually an introvert and extrovert mixed personality. So even though I don't go out of my way to make friendships, I'm also very friendly with people. Everyone I meet, I'm always assuming I'll have your best interest and you are having my best interest. And which is not true. Even though you might meet hundreds and thousands of people in your life and strangers, not everyone will always have your best interest. Only some people may think about having your best interests in life. But this realization doesn't get built in our life until we age and mature and start interacting more with humanity. Now, this is also a major cause of depression for many people when they move out of their parental homes, when they move out to a different city, move out to a different country, start getting married and move out with their spouses, and they will feel this aspect of depression influencing their lives, especially when they are with partners who aren't mature, who aren't thinking about each other's safety, each other's care, each other's beneficial life direction related goals. Because most people nowadays, when they get married, are selfish to a degree, and more than selfish, it's immaturity and lack of maturity in understanding their own benefit. Like, if you are with a spouse, and if you are the only one taking all the pains to be the sorted and mature spouse, and your spouse is not living up to that level, eventually you will get depressed and lonely in a relationship. And it can happen to both spouses, or it can happen to one spouse more than the other. It just depends, because many people are so privileged sometimes in the way they have been brought up, that their parents did everything for them, or the parents did nothing for them. Both can happen. If your parents have done nothing for you, or the bare minimum while you were growing up, you have been so much in survival mode that even when a safe relationship comes around for you, some people just can't adjust to that safe relationship, and they will run away from the safe relationship, and they will create all kinds of toxic past living related dynamics in those relationships, and just keep self-sabotaging themselves. And then there are some people who have been so much in survival mode that they want just simple safety, simple life. They don't expect a lot from life. They are happy with whatever they have, in the sense that they're content with the bare minimum. But even in the bare minimum, those people who have been in survival mode have trained themselves to understand what is genuine love, what is not genuine love, what is authentic love, what is toxic love, what is greedy love, what is selfish love, what is the love which breaches our barriers. Why? Because you've been surviving all the time, so you know which person loves you for who you are, and which person has the capacity to just love you for some aspect of you that you aren't even actually, but they project it on you and are like, say you have a beautiful body, so everyone can assume that you have a beautiful body because you want to be sexy, or you because of that body you want to entice people and become like a, in Indian mythology, the Rambhas and Apsaras are the terminologies used for the people who want to come and entice a man to do all kinds of shady sexual stuff. And in Christianity they call it a Jezebel spirit of someone who wants to entice a man to do all kinds of nasty stuff. Or you look in the story of the Trojan horse, where Helen of Troy was made that focal point of the war because she was so beautiful. But is it really a woman's beauty or a woman's body that is responsible for all of these things? Or is it sometimes their nature that is causing this to happen? And is it just the woman's nature, or also the nature of the men around them, which causes them to become the Jezebel, or which causes someone to be considered as highly sexual when they are not? So because sometimes it can be the woman herself who's doing certain things. The Jezebel spirit is that kind of a woman who is deliberately trying to trap a woman, who's a man into doing all kinds of nasty sexual stuff. In Hinduism also we have the story of Surpanakha, who was trying to entice Ram into having a relationship with her even though he was married. So these kind of women do exist. There are women who will entice men using their sensuality and sexuality to get whatever they can get. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are also women who are equally beautiful like these women, who have equal capacity to trap someone into loving them, but they don't want to trap anyone into loving them. They don't want to trap and play mind games with anyone into having sexual relationships with them. But just because they have the same form as this Jezebel spirit, or as the woman like Surpanakha, they are considered like that. So there's a difference, right? Someone who is actually manipulating people, who is actually trapping people, versus someone who has the potential to do it but doesn't really do it. So I would encounter men like that in my life, who would always put all these labels on me based on the kind of relationships and toxic relations they had in their life with other women, or with their parents or family members who were like that. And even though I was not like those women, I have always been labeled like that, because of which every time I would get in a slightly deeper relationship than I have been raised in, and tried to make it work as a relationship, it didn't work, and those relationships fell apart because I was being labeled as someone that I wasn't. And people were perceiving, those boys that I dated were perceiving me as someone that I wasn't. And because they were perceiving me one way, and they were behaving with me assuming that way about me, it wasn't matching the way I am at the core level. And because it was not matching the way I am at the core level, at the soul level, at the heart level, and they were only intellectually or sexualizing me. One was intellectually looking at me in a particular way, manipulative way, and one was looking at me sexually and psychologically in a different manipulative way, both of which were very harmful to me, both of which were very harmful to the future toxic future direction of any relationship, where people perceive you as something that you're not. and hence they both became toxic relationships eventually in the future. And there were different things that I was also doing that wasn't really right on my part to behave in that way, both of which led to the relationships just self-destructing eventually. But while those relationships were self-destructing, I got so depressed. The first relationship in which, when I was being sexually being objectified, psychologically being deliberately manipulated, when the words I was saying was not enough for the person in front of me to understand me, and instead they were ascribing all these psychological stuff on me that wasn't true about me, and they were not ready to verify that from me. Instead they had their own story about me of what I'm thinking, and anything that was constructively told as a criticism was taken as a destructive criticism, and all these kind of toxic dynamics started playing. And I was getting so miserable and so depressed because I really deeply felt connected to this human being. I deeply loved this human being, and I couldn't understand why, despite the deep love and deep connection that I felt with him, things are not working out, and why we are not able to find a meaningful middle ground to work through our problems. And because I was so depressed, and this was constantly likely running in my mind and bringing my energy down, that I ended up going into a couple of accidents while living in this relationship. The first accident that happened was one time I was a little late for work. No, even before that, sorry. The first accident that happened was when I was studying as a master's student in US. Actually, I had gone there for a PhD. I even failed my PhD program because I was so much lost in this relationships toxicity, and also because I was not that suited for that particular PhD program. So because of both these reasons and my lack of ability to concentrate on doing the work that was needed to be done as a PhD student, I failed my PhD program, and eventually I ended up doing a master's. Now that part itself added a little bit of depression, and failure can make us feel like really poorly about ourselves, make us feel insecure about ourselves. But even though I was feeling poorly, even though I was feeling insecure, the more things that led to my depression was related to my relationship than this insecurity. So while I was before I failed this program, while I was taking the classes that were necessary to be taken as part of this program, I one day, when coming out of a class, was so unmindful, was so much deeply in thought about this toxic relationship, that I simply fell down the stairs and sprained my ankle. And I didn't realize I sprained my ankle, but a friend observed that I got hurt, so she took me to the doctor, and the doctor finally gave the diagnosis that I have a sprained ankle because I fell down. And at that time also, even though I had a boyfriend, even though I had a roommate, because you're living in a foreign country, you have to do everything by yourself. And luckily, because God also knows that I'm alone in a foreign country, I didn't get more than just a simple sprain, and I was able to function most of the time. I had to go through that pain for a few weeks or months, and that's about it. But in those months or weeks of pain, if both the roommate and that person who was my boyfriend had really cared about me, they could have done a little bit more, which they didn't. They just did the bare minimum, for which I was thankful to them. But they also showed to me in what level that I can have a connection with these people, in what level when I needed help they showed up or didn't show up, showed to me that what level of friendship and relationship can be had, the depth of friendship or relationship that could be had with these human beings. And because of this, I didn't hold it against either of them, but you understand human nature of how selfish someone will be or how helpful someone will be when you are in trouble. And likewise, one time I broke my arms while walking down the slippery, icy roads of my college, And because I was not used to living in a cold, icy country, it was very easy for me to break again and have a minor fracture or sprain in my hands that time. And again, the same thing happened. The way some people showed up and the way some people don't show up showed to me the deeper soul level connection that can be had with someone, or that can be lost with someone when trouble strikes you. So all these things were happening to me, and in this relationship I was slowly realizing I was not getting respect, I was not getting love, I was not getting care that a true deeper relationship can potentially have. And when I failed my exam that time also, I was a little depressed and other things. And at those times, God has always shown me some friend or some help where I could easily get out of the things that make most people be depressed, that make most people stay in low insecurities of their life. But luckily for me, even though I had these troubles, because there was something else that was happening that made me get out of the troubles, I didn't go into the suicidal route at all when I failed, because I never even had been trained by my family to consider failure as a big thing. Because my family life, when I was growing up, people had usually ignored me because I'm maybe the girl child, or because of other reasons. My family never pushed me to succeed. They wanted me to get good grades, but other than me getting good grades, everything else related to my professional life was something they didn't even really care about. Like, there was literally no one who cared if I got a PhD or didn't get a PhD, if I got a master's or didn't get a master's, if I had a job or didn't have a job. Because my family was stuck at the level where to them a girl child needs to be educated till college, and after that they need to either get married. So that's the only thing my dad would ever talk to me about ever since I went to US, when I would get married. And that too, he wouldn't talk to me because he was the concerned father. He would talk to me only when maybe some friend of his asked, okay, if your daughter isn't married, there is someone we know, would you like to connect with her so that we can think about marriage, like how normal arranged marriage things happen in India. So if someone was trying to get an arranged marriage proposal through my dad, that's when he would bother about contacting me and asking me, would you like to talk to this guy, or this. Other than that, I lived in US for 13 years. I literally had a handful of like 5 or 6 phone calls with my dad in those 13 years. That's the level of connection I had with my family when I lived outside the country. And that's the level of connection my dad has the capacity to have actually with any human being he knows, because he just didn't build that kind of connectivity with others. His level of connectivity is whoever is in front of him, with them he will connect. But if people are not in front of him, he also used to be this way with his own family, even though he could have had chances to call and connect with them regularly, once a year, once a month, from his office phone, or by going to the STD booth and spending 10 rupees on his family by speaking to them for 1 minute. I have never seen my dad do that. The thing that my dad did do though, and that he inculcated in me, was the fact that we would go to our relatives and visit them from Bombay. We used to live in Bombay and our relatives used to live in Kolkata and West Bengal. So we would visit them in West Bengal, make sure that when we were there in West Bengal, we would visit all family. So that once a year visit, or once in 2-3 years visit to them, was the way in which I was connected to my family. And because I was raised like that, it was not unusual for me also to do the same thing. When I was living in US, once a year, once in every 2-3 years, I would also visit my family in India, come and visit them in Bengal, come and visit them in Maharashtra. But the same reciprocity that should happen in relationships wasn't happening. So slowly over time, that's why I started getting more and more depressed. But it was an internal slow burn of depression happening, because no one cared to reciprocate the same level of love, same level of effort, same level of care, same level of putting aside their work to take the time to take a holiday, when in my work my official vacation times were only 2 weeks, but I would deliberately try to ensure and work overtime before I left for India, to expand my vacation hours to 3 or 4 weeks, so that I could get that extra time to spend with all the friends and family that I want to interact with in India. But were my friends or were my family giving me that same equal input? No. Even though I'm putting aside the 3 weeks time or 4 weeks time to go and visit them all, and out of those 3 4 weeks, of course, each person I'm visiting is only for like 3 4 days or 1 week or 2 weeks. Somewhere some of these people got 2 3 weeks of my time, some of these people got only 3 days of my time, but I still kept aside 3 days for them. I still kept aside 1 week for some. I still kept aside a couple of hours of friendship time for them over phone calls or over visits. But the same thing was hardly ever reciprocated back to me via any relationship, which eventually led me to become more and more suicidal in the later years of my life, when I was really lonely, when I realized like I have poured love into people who are not capable of reciprocating that same love or care or time or energy back to me. So that was a thing that I started experiencing in my late 30s, especially after I got divorced and I figured out certain other things about my family. But until my early 20s to late 30s, what was going on in my life? In that time, when this boyfriend was not treating me well, was not treating me with respect, was objectifying me based on my body or sexuality, or the depth of sexuality we were feeling for each other, and other things were going wrong in that relationship. Uh, First, I had this minor sprain in my foot, but the next accident that happened was I was so distorted and distracted by the emotional impact of the toxic relationship that I didn't pay attention while driving on the road, and I ended up crossing a red signal, and a truck came and hit my car. It was a pickup truck, not the kind of truck you get in India, but the pickup truck that you get in US, and that was a large vehicle which hit my slightly smaller vehicle and caused a major accident such that my car got totaled. But luckily for me, I only faced a whiplash in that accident. Nothing happened to my physical health, but it was a wake up call. And then the next wake up call again came when this, while being with this relationship and while feeling depressed about this relationship, again I was late at work, and this time I had an accident and near death experience in a highway. Now, both three accidents happened while I was in this relationship within a span of 1 year, or even like maybe 6 7 months. And in that span, I realized how toxic my life was. That every time I'm emotionally investing into a human being, and getting so wrapped up in why the relationship is not working, what is going wrong in it, why can't we connect with each other deeply and meaningfully, or why we are having toxic fights. All these why was so much preoccupying me that I was losing focus of my work. I was losing focus of simple care, because I was again going into survival mode with this toxic relationship. And when you are in survival mode, you will also sometimes not just be in survival mode, you can also get into careless mode when you are in a toxic relationship. And all these carelessness, unmindfulness, lack of ability to do the right thing started causing these accidents. So that's when I decided I will not risk my life. I will not do things that are going to lead to accidents, because two of the accidents happened because my work was a 30 minutes drive. I had to do like a 15 minutes drive on roadways and 15 minutes drive on the highways. So instead of doing that, instead of risking driving for this long, I decided to stay closer to my work, and that would also mean I would be further away from this toxic boyfriend, and that small separation would eventually maybe help us in deciding whether the relationship was meant to last or didn't mean to last. And that is what happened. The relationship didn't last. The distance did help in making that boy think twice about visiting me. And when I was not making the efforts to go and visit him, it eventually broke apart and fell apart. So once it fell apart, even though I was sad, I was depressed, I considered it as a blessing, because there's no point in living with someone who is toxic to you, who is unhealthy for you, and being with whom you can lose so much track of your life that you can end up being in all kinds of really crazy accidents. So I decided to focus on my life. I decided to focus on my work. I got really good enough at my work. I can't say I was the best pharmacist, but I was the best of gave the best of my abilities while being a pharmacist. And I learned so many things that I'm good at while working as a pharmacist. And so for a few years, I had a good time being a pharmacist. I had a good life, and while I was having this good, peaceful life, free of all relationships, that's when I was also attracting some proposals from family life and other things. But they didn't work out because I was still in love with this boy, and they also didn't work out because these people I met while I was thinking of considering marrying them, because my family had pushed them or some friends had suggested them. I also realized why we weren't compatible with each other, and things like that happened. I realized certain things, those boys realized certain things, and things never worked out in the personal front. But because I was independent, because I was working by myself, because I was competent at what I was doing, I never felt at that late 20s or early 30s that I need to get married, even though everyone around me was getting married. In fact, after I hit my 30s, I was actually free of that burden. I decided to become free of the burden of the social pressure that Indian girls get, that if they are not married by mid 20s, that they are worthless, or if they are not married by even early 30s, they are worthless because their biological clock is ticking and all that stuff. I just decided to let go of that stuff and let go of that burden, because I decided, why should I consider, even though from 15 years of age to the early 30s, I had wanted to be a mother, I had wanted to have a child of my own, I had wanted to be in a stable relationship because my parents' relationship hadn't been stable. I had wished to have a family of my own. None of those wishes were getting fulfilled, and when none of those wishes got fulfilled, I realized that maybe that's not the path meant for me, and I was slowly leaning towards the path of either adopting a kid in the future or marrying only for other reasons. And I was slowly changing and myself and my perspective on life, and understanding, like, yeah, if I, based on the social support system I had in my life, if I had really had a kid in my 30s, or if I wanted to adopt a kid in my 30s, I couldn't do it because I didn't have a appropriate social system built for it. And in that early 30s, many of my friends also moved away. The friendships that I had built in the last 3-4 years of my life while working as a pharmacist, all those deeper friendships, or slightly somewhat deeper friendships, also slowly started getting lost, because those people had their job priorities, their marital priorities, and they moved away based on whatever priorities they had set up for themselves. So eventually, in my early 30s, I became very lonely again for the second time, for a different set of reasons, because friends were moving away, and childhood friends had all become mothers, and they were young mothers of toddlers, so they didn't have time to speak, didn't have time to interact, didn't have energy to interact, and which I understood, because I could see how difficult motherhood can be when I would visit some of my friends and some of my family who had kids that age. So while I came to the second phase of isolation and loneliness, that's when I met the second boyfriend, who was a nicer guy, who was a respectful guy, who didn't objectify women as such. But even then, he had some unhealed wounds, which didn't respect someone who has a job, doesn't respect a woman for their work ethics or their work or what they are investing in their work. So, oh, and he was younger to me, so having him have that realization was also a little bit of a unrealistic expectation. But I eventually realized many Indian men are like that. They will not respect a woman for their work. They will not respect for a woman if they offer easily all the things financially that a man can also offer, because for them that's their goal. And I'm yet to meet a single guy who doesn't only consider making money as his primary role. I have yet to meet a single guy who doesn't understand only the importance of having a good family life, what it means to them. Because after this second boyfriend disaster also, I again fell into an accident, and this time around I was so miserable because I couldn't make the second relationship work, that I was again getting depressed, and I was telling God that I want to die, I want to die, I want to die. And when I was saying I want to die, I met with a severe accident again. And this time again, my car got damaged, not me. But when I had that severe accident, it was basically another wake up call from the universe that do you really want to die, or do you want to rethink it? And the gods and the guides were telling me, like, I know, we know you are wanting to die, but do you really want to die? And that's when I realized, oh, I'm making the same mistake again, wrapping myself up in again toxic people, toxic relationships, wondering why toxic things didn't work out instead of focusing on myself. So again, brought the focus back to myself. And I said to the universe, yeah, of course, I don't want to die. I have a good, healthy life where I'm earning well. I was doing MBA at that time. I'm doing well in my MBA program as well. So I didn't really have a reason for wanting to die. And because of which, my life continued on. But that time I set this goal with the universe that I'm so tired of dating and all. I just want to meet a nice guy and marry, and that's it. Whoever asks me for marriage at this point of time in my life, I'm going to marry them. So the first guy who proposed to me after that phase, I ended up marrying. But it was a rebound relationship. It was the most unhealthiest of all my relationships, and it was a catalyst for me to really wake up to what is important in life. Because again, I married someone Indian. This Indian family was ultra conservative. Even though they had lived in US for 13 years, they didn't respect a woman for being independent. They didn't respect a woman for having her own independent train of thoughts. They didn't respect even a woman enough who has been married into their house to give her the respect to have space to show her emotions. Like when I was crying, they held it against me. When I was angry, they held it against me. When I was angry, in fact, they told me to leave the house, and I left, because I was like, if I'm not respected, why should I live with people who can't even let me express my anger, a valid reason for being angry. And I was having just that quarrel with my husband, but my in-laws interfered and told me to leave. So I was like, okay, fine, this is my in-laws' house, and my husband also told me to leave, and my in-laws also told me to leave. So I left, because I'm like, I won't stay in any place where I'm not valued. By then already 2 relationships had shown me what lack of value means, but this was like the worst lack of value that I experienced in my life. And because of this, when I left, I not only left this family, but eventually after a few months of going through whatever rubbish that this family wanted to put me through, I also left US, because the same thing happened in US, that I was not being valued for what I can offer to the US population. And yes, I didn't show my value in some ways, but in many ways I had shown my value. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been qualified to study 4 different degree programs in US and get 3 different kinds of degrees from US. I left a degree partially midway because of visa reasons. So all these things were also going around at the same time in my life, and I was fighting all these battles.
on my own, with no support, zero social support from anyone in my life. But even though I had zero social support from anyone in my life, I always had the support of the universe to guide me to the best path possible at that moment. And because of which, even though my in-laws were like pushing me into coercing me into going through a legal battle with them, I didn't want a legal battle, and I wanted mental peace and mental health. I didn't want to sit and fight with toxic people unnecessarily over stupid things, because they couldn't offer me anything even though they thought they could offer me something. And even though at that point of time when I had been married, I was also unemployed for a few months during that marriage phase, that I could have asked for alimony and other things. I didn't simply fight for it, and I left a legal battle and came back to India thinking that if God wants that, I had consulted some legal lawyers, and based on their suggestions only, I made the decision to leave India. And not just their suggestions, because I have studied law in different degree programs where law is required for my degrees of MBA, as well as practicing as a pharmacist and studying pharmacy law. I knew what law means. I read the laws regarding my situation, and I could see that it would be a waste of time and energy to go and pursue some legal justice for what I was going through, because I was in a borderline phase and I didn't wish to be a victim. I didn't wish to sit and stay in a toxic marriage so that the law will support me eventually. I could support myself enough to know that I don't care also about a marriage tag, not married tag or anything, and I left US. And after that, when I came back to US, that's when the third severe phase of depression hit me, and that's when actually suicidal thoughts hit me. Until my mid 30s, suicidal thoughts were more like depression oriented. I would just feel like this thing is not working out and I really wish to die, God, something like that. It was not a oh, I want to go and plan this thing and murder myself or kill myself or go and do hit my car against something. It was never like that. But I could see all the places where I could have killed myself. Like I could have dashed my car against something, against a bridge or something, and died. Or all these thoughts that could come to you as places where people can kill themselves. Those kind of thoughts would randomly come when I'm not depressed, but just ideas on how people die. Because and I also knew, because of the prescription drug overdosage problems, there were people who were dying deliberately of suicide from these prescription drugs that they are taking, and there are people who are dying also from prescription drug overuse simply because they don't understand the harms of the drugs they are taking. So as a pharmacist, I was very responsible, even though I had access to so many medicines that if I had taken one day I would have died easily. Never thoughts like that came to me when I was working as a pharmacist. Not a single time was I tempted to use these drugs, was I tempted to kill myself, even though I lived alone for 13 years. In those 13 years, even though I had boyfriends and a husband for a while, none of them lived with me. I was living on my own most of the time. Like in 13 years, not even 13 days have people lived with me as life partners. So if I was living 13 years all by myself, being alone, not getting help from anyone, and going after trouble after trouble after trouble, with no resolution to some of those troubles, and even then, even though I was depressed, I was not suicidal. Why? Because I was leading a mostly happy life, mostly content life. No one, even though I was getting disrespected as a woman, I was never getting disrespected as a human, never getting disrespected for the knowledge I possess, never at work. I always had patients who respected me, never got disrespect from my colleagues. There was one colleague who disrespected me, but that was a blip. Like you can go live through any minor disrespect in all your life if most other conditions are okay in your life. And even though I failed, even though I didn't succeed at what I was doing in many levels, I was mostly content with my life. But
the things um, that also helped save me when I was living my life in my 20s and 30s, and I had reached sometimes very deeply loneliness or disconnect filled life from other humans, and had thought about suicide. The only reason I didn't die was because that letter that I had seen of my mom, which indicated that she was depressed. And then one conversation with my brother told me that one time my mom had also attempted suicide. These two things combined made me realize, like, if my mom had tried to commit suicide when we were kids and she had been stopped from doing that, after that her life hadn't been that great, because that's when our life had started falling apart with our mom, and our connectivity to our mom had disappeared. But this information that I gave to my brother and my brother gave to me made me think, okay, if our mom was suicidal and the repercussions that had happened because of her being suicidal, I didn't wish to be like that. I didn't wish to commit suicide and bring my brother and dad or any other family into any kind of sadness because I died, or because I committed suicide in a different country. So that thought was always there in my back of my mind, which also prevented me from ever considering suicide as an option. And that was enough of a barrier to not make me consider dying. But when I came back to India, I finally realized, when I was living with my brother and dad, they didn't really care if I existed or didn't exist with them, if I stayed or didn't stay with them, if I lived or died, because when I was living with them, certain things started manifesting, which was showing to me that they didn't really care about my existence in their life or presence in their life. And then when I was staying apart from them in my own place in India, same thing started happening. So they completely devalued me as a human, devalued me as a family, devalued me not only as a human and a family, also started devaluing my education, which was happening not just with my dad, but many other places when I was applying for jobs, or many other places where I did end up working while in India. Same devaluing was happening of what I was capable of offering as a human, offering as a person with the education that I have, offering as just part of humanity. So that's when true depression and true suicidal thoughts started hitting me. I really started getting into what are the steps I can take to actually commit suicide, which I had never thought about. And in fact, even before reaching this stage, there are some other things that happened. But from all these experiences of things that can cause us depression, things that can cause us to be lost, things that can cause us to be disconnected from humanity, if God is there with you, you will never die. If God knows how to bring you back into getting connected to humanity, you just have to ask God what you need. Because there are even more things that I want to tell, which is not related to just depression, which is not related to just suicidal thoughts, which were all factors that literally made me one day say to God that if my connection to all humanity is gone right now, I am open to dying even today. Because I was in such a health crisis at that moment, and a crisis that no one understood about me, around me in my life, that only God understood that I was in crisis, and only God was sending me energy to survive through it. That I had made that deal with God that I'm leaving, even though I'm having suicidal thoughts, I'm leaving the final decision to die on you. Because if my value and worth as a human being is lost for everyone around my life, in my life, then it is up to God to decide whether I should continue or not continue. And I also understood deeply at that time why my mom died. I also started understanding deeply why other family members of my life died. And that's why only in that level where the things that had killed my mother, caused severe diseases and illnesses in my family, and also eventually killed some of my other family members,
everything like that was happening to me. I was going through all those diseases, and even then I didn't die because I had the education that I had, that stopped me from continuing some harmful health harm related things that humans do in their lives that can add to their disease. And as I found out all more and more about what was leading my disease to worsen, or what was causing my disease to get better, I started practicing them. And because I was practicing them, and because I was still practicing how to survive, that's why I didn't die. And that's why, despite having suicidal thoughts of killing myself, I kept on surviving. So for everyone who's going through depression or suicidal thoughts or lack of attachment to family members, or having family around them who just simply don't understand their problem, know this: God understands your problem, God sees your problem, God has a solution to your problem, even when your problem seems unresolvable. But you have to ask God when society doesn't know how to resolve your problem. Or if not God, you have to keep seeking the right intervention for your problem. Because sometimes my suicidal thoughts also happened because of the chemicals that were there in my environment, and as soon as I get away from those chemicals, my suicidal thoughts disappear. My suicidal thoughts were also happening because of darkness filled thoughts that were entering my brain. And if I ignore those thoughts, and if I make those thoughts a temporary experience, then also the suicidal thoughts disappear and it stops being important. Suicidal thoughts can also disappear. I saw a recent post by someone on from Reddit, that someone else had posted on reposted on YouTube, that the reason why they didn't they were suicidal, they had called a hotline and no one could help them in the hotline. And when they found that very ironic, that even though they are calling a suicidal hotline, they still couldn't get help, they started laughing, because they had a sense of humor at the irony of life, that sometimes even suicidal hotlines can fail you. So having that sense of humor saved that person that day, and that same sense of humor can keep saving them again and again if they keep focusing on what is beautiful about life, what is ironic about the circumstances of our life, and things like that. So there's always a solution, unique to us, individual to us, specific to us. You have to ask God for it, you have to ask other humans also. But if those humans are unavailable, like the humans in a suicidal hotline, doesn't mean that there isn't a human who will understand your pain. I have literally been partly homeless for the last couple of years, and in that partly homeless stage, I'm not homeless meaning I don't have a home. I have had enough money in my life to be able to at least find a homestay or a hotel to stay in, even though I'm not working right now. But even though I'm not working, I still have enough savings to sustain myself for a while. And while I have been sustaining myself for a while, based on all my income that I have saved, that I never used when I was single person, because I'm not the partying kind, I'm not the overspending kind, I'm not the frivolous girl that most girls are, and even I'm a very responsible human being. So because of that, whatever money I had when I'm near cancer levels, or when I actually do have cancer but people are not understanding my reports, which I understand because I have the education to understand what my blood reports and what my test results were indicating. And because of all these reasons, just because people around me are not understanding that I have cancer, or people around me are not understanding what is harmful for my health, or they are instead adding on to the health harm that was taking me more towards death, but which God was not letting me die. So because God was not letting me die from the disease, or letting me keep on continuing with the suicidal thoughts, I had no choice but to keep surviving, and also understand, if I am surviving, why I am still surviving, or how can I survive meaningfully and have a better quality life than what I already have had and have existed for 30-40 years of my life. So because of this reason, I'm still surviving. Because of this reason, I'm making these videos. Each of us has to understand why we are still surviving, what is the purpose of us living when we are suicidal,
how can we add meaning to the life if of others? Because most of the time when people are suicidal, they're suicidal because they have stopped adding meaning to the life of others, or their own life is so much of a mess that they can't aid others anymore. Like farmers who commit suicide, is it like they commit suicide the day they went in debt? No, they probably struggled for debt, and their crops were failing year after year after year, and because the farmer didn't understand why their crops are failing, they continued doing the practices that were harmful for their crops, and that's why their crops are failing. So that's the solution for a farmer to not do suicide, not taking loans for crops that are failing, but to find out why your crops are failing, or stop farming. That is the solution to a farmer whose crop is failing, or a farmer who is poor and he's taking loans to marry his daughter off. You shouldn't marry that daughter off if you need to take loans. So these are the solutions. There is a social solution, and there's a solution that is different from what this farmer is used to seeing all his friends do it, or thinking that this is the best solution, but it is not. So likewise, or a housewife who commits suicide when her husband is not fair, or her husband is sexually abusive, physically abusive, financially abusive, psychologically abusive, you can't simply check out of your life, which is what my mother did. She had a lot of degrees of abuse going on, not just from her husband, from all of us. And because of the abuse happening in her life, neglect happening in her life, she got disconnected, and she didn't commit suicide eventually when she died. She just died because God decided that the trouble of this human being was has reached a point where none of the people around her life will be able to intervene in time to help her, and because of which she died. And she also didn't wish to likely live her life, because I have walked the half of the same path as my mom. I finally understood that, because God had given me a choice. I could have died any of the last few years, times when my heart was simply failing the same way as my mom's heart was failing. My other organs were also failing similarly, like my mom's organs were failing. And despite there being doctors in my mother's family, and despite a 25 years gap between my mother's health worsening and my health worsening, 25 to 30 years gap, these family people who are doctors have still not woken up to what is the reason why my mom died. They have ascribed it to one heart attack, they have ascribed it to some liver failure, and that's it. Other than that, they have not understood at all the deeper reasons why my mom died. Heart attack and liver failure that my mom had previously on the day she died was just a symptom of the things that led to her heart failure and led to her liver failure. And if you don't figure out why a person's liver is failing, you failed as a doctor. Then all you're doing is simply making money out of the misery of other human beings. And there are 90% of the doctors in the universe right now, 90% of healthcare practitioners in the universe right now are failing in their profession, but they don't understand why they are failing. Because these people have this, they have never failed in their life. That's why they became doctors. Doctors are the most intellectually capable people on earth, intellectually able to hold a lot of information in their mind, and that's why they're able to prescribe so many medicines, so many solutions to the people. But because doctors have failed to understand the right solution specific to the right patient condition, life and health condition, many doctors are failing. And if you keep going to those failing doctors and then wondering why am I suicidal, that's why you're suicidal. You're going to the wrong solution for your problem. Not just about doctors. If you've gone to the wrong human being, your crops are failing, you're going to a bank to get more money to keep on failing at what you're failing at already. So what will the bank do? Bank is just doing whatever the bank does. Bank doesn't have solutions for farmers. Very few banks have actually meaningful solutions for farmers to redirect them towards not the practices that will make them fail further in their farming. People have to stop using chemicals in farming. People have to stop using chemicals in their life, those chemicals that are causing the brain cells to die. And because the brain cells are dying, that is causing not just brain cells, their heart cells are dying because of these chemicals, all of which are causing human beings to get more and more detached chemically also from the reason for their existence or as a human being. So there are so many reasons. There's a chemical reason, there's a physical reason, there's a psychological reason, there's an emotional reason, there are physical life limitations based reason, there are financial reasons. There are so many multiple reasons that cause a person to think about committing suicide or that lead a person to actually do suicide. But if you are going to a suicide hotline and they are only able to think and understand about your financial reason or only able to understand your psychological reasons, is that going to cause any problems to materialize? Or if a doctor thinks there's a physical imbalance in your brain and they'll give you a medicine, but if your life's problems are not just about a chemical imbalance but more than just the chemical imbalance, do you have to find that solution, or do you have to will you eventually end up committing suicide? If the people who are working on a suicide hotline, if the doctors were treating a patient for mental health issues, if the bank was giving a farmer a loan for their financial health issues, doesn't consider all the other factors surrounding that farmer's crop to fail, or that person who has gone to the doctor for a psychological treatment, why they need that treatment, it's a partial solution, it's not a complete solution. And when the complete solution is absent, you will eventually either become suicidal, end up committing suicide, or if not committing suicide and being suicidal, you will continue being depressed about things that partly aren't your fault, that needs a solution from a whole range of people around you to resolve. That's why many people get suicidal, many people get depressed. And if you want to get out of depression, if you want to get out of the suicidal modalities, ask a question to this on this post, and I'll try to reply either with the future post or based on the questions you have asked about the problem you're facing in your life. Because I have faced multiple life problems, I've faced multiple health problems. I know the physical, spiritual, chemical, psychological, emotional reasons and financial reasons why someone can wish to commit suicide. And even after that wish, you can survive through it if you take the right steps towards changing your life. And each of us has very unique, very life specific, life purpose specific reasons for being suicidal or for being depressed. So once you find out those reasons and acknowledge that is the actual reason why you're depressed or suicidal, only then you can go towards solving the problems of your life. And when it is a complex problem, it can't be solved in one day. It takes a couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months, and even a couple of years to solve complex problems. So you have to be ready to face those problems one by one by one. I hope this video was educational and informational. Sorry it's a long video, but it's a complex topic and I've reduced 30 years of my life in this video, and even then I haven't said everything that I need to say. So please leave a comment if this seems